If I am a producer and I have a few cronies that want to follow me and I want to operate my own branch, what does that look like?
Sure. First, I'll say we have to talk about my family in this episode.
Okay.
No gambling, no drinking. I got to talk to my kids or wife or something.
All right, sign deal.
We got to get that. Okay.
Making the moves. Okay.
Okay. Let's wrap it up with that.
We're bringing the gambler back. He was such a good interview the first time. We talked about the ESOP, talked about his vices. Might have some follow-up questions for him today. This is Jason Wheatley, the CFO of DAS Acquisition, USA Mortgage. But today, we're not going to talk about ESOPs. We're not going to really even talk about numbers, so to speak. We're going to talk about what it means to run your own branch, run your own region, and how we operate, how we're a little bit different. Because, Jason, before I start asking you questions, I will say this. If you've experienced this in your mortgage career, or you're thinking about experiencing it in your mortgage career, you will find that running a P&L is a very loose phrase. Mm-hmm. Because there's true P&Ls and there's not true P&Ls. And so let's digress into a question, a very simple question, which is, if I am a producer and I have a few cronies that want to follow me and I want to operate my own branch, what does that look like?
Sure. First, I'll say we have to talk about my family in this episode.
Okay.
No gambling, no drinking. I got to talk to my kids or wife or something.
All right, sign deal.
We got to get that. Okay.
Making the moves. Okay.
Let's wrap it up with that. I think I'll start with kind of what we see usually as a transition, how we've learned what the difference is. So we only know one thing, really, right? So we know that our P&L works a certain way, and I think the way that we've learned how it's different, or why I think it's better, is by interviewing and bringing on newer branch managers to USA Mortgage, or these high-level producers to USA Mortgage, or just a new branch manager in general, never done it before, right? So what we see a lot is our competitors, our peers out there, a P&L to them is more you produce and the corporate office allocates expenses to you every month, right? So a corporate office will say, hey, great, you generated X dollars of revenue, we're going to hit you with X dollars of expense. And that's variable month to month. You don't really know what that is. And so what I think the difference is for us is we don't really, ahead of time what's going to happen. You know all the expenses that are hitting your P&L. You know how we handle it. You know the approach we take. You know every month the consistency's there. And allows you to run a business kind of knowing what your fixed costs are, right? So it's almost impossible to run a business if you don't know what your expenses are. And month to month, you may think you're having a great month, and somebody sweeps in behind you and says, hey, by the way, I know it was $10 last month for X, and now it's $15. Just so you know now at the last minute. So we just treat that a little bit differently. We try to be as upfront as we can about it, so that you can kind of run it in a real business fashion. And there's a lot more to that we can get into if you want to. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, it's good. It's a good 30,000-foot view because it creates some questions. And my first question is, why would a company operate in the variable to where it's almost an unknown? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Just guessing, but I think that the reason that a company would do that, say, whatever, XYZ mortgage company, they're managing a bottom line, right, for the total company. That's tough to do for any company. It's just, our industry is the same thing. You never know every month. I have no idea, what product type of loans we're going to close, what the average size is. I have no idea what our revenue is going to be month to month. I can take guesses and plan for that accordingly, but I don't know. And so by having all that variable expense allocated to a P&L at the end of the month, or to multiple P&Ls across a business, a mothership or corporate office can control their bottom line a little bit better. And it makes it easier for them to do that because they can just come in at the end of the day and say, hey, we made 50 grand, we want to make 100, so we're going to push out 50 grand of cost, something like that. Whereas we have to, I think it's a little more difficult, but we have to understand what all of our people are doing, what all our branches are doing, and make the business work for us around that, as opposed to making the P&Ls work for us, so to speak. We take and give what we need to. We kind of make ours work more around what our branch managers are doing, what our producers are doing, and making the profitability work accordingly.
The word that comes to mind is transparency, whether it's a lack thereof or full transparency.
Sure. I think a lot of people put up with that just because they don't know otherwise, right? So we talked to a lot of people that have been at the same company for 15 years, 10 years, whatever, been managing a P&L for that long, and they don't know otherwise. So we show them how we do it, and it really opens their eyes, and it really starts getting them to think. And it's a tough transition, though. It's not for somebody that has never done that before. It's extremely tough, and there's a little bit of a learning curve, and you've seen it with partners that you brought on board, because a lot of the people that we talk to, I'll say that they think they're running a P&L, but it's just not the way we do it. In that, a lot of the expenses are allocated to the P&L. They close their loans. They have their processors, or maybe processors are corporate, and corporate pushes all those expenses to the P&L and kind of says, here's what you're dealing with, right? Whereas you and your team, you guys are kind of deciding, hey, I'm going to hire this processor. Ultimately it has to run through corporate just for legal reasons, but you guys to say, I'm gonna hire a processor, or I'm gonna expand into this region, or I'm going to go on this trip to recruit or to educate myself or whatever, and you're driving those expenses based off of the revenue that you think you're going to generate, right? The way you're running your business. And so, giving raises, determining bonus plans, determining comp plans, am I going to open this office? All those are big decisions to make that at a lot of other places you don't have to make them necessarily, because they're kind of made for you. Or you have to get that ultimate approval. And whereas we give approval, but it's more, you call up and say, hey, here's what we're thinking about doing. Or you put through, a request or whatever it is, and we talk about it, right? And so you have to understand it, but you have to understand the impact. We try to make sure you understand the impact before that decision is made. So it's like running a real business. It's not just kind of sitting there closing loans and somebody telling you how much you made. You see that daily. You can go and look at your P&L and see what you're doing and make decisions based off that.
It's autonomous in that regard.
Absolutely.
But at the same token, and you kind of mentioned and you discuss, a lot of people either A, don't have experience doing it, or B, they have experience doing it in a model by which is not really a true P&L. But because companies throw around the word P&L so loosely, I think it's just the lack of the ignorance that there is, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but just the ignorance towards what it means to actually run a business isn't there. And the other side of the coin is running everybody thinks on the outside that operating a P&L equals getting rich. And that's your reaction.
Even on the inside. I don't mean you. I mean, you have a sales manager or something, and they think, I want a P&L.
100%.
Right, that's
100%. Yeah. So, but in other words, when you sign up to run a true P&L, you're also signing up for the last 2 years, which means potentially operating at a negative, which you can't typically do in a more simple model. And I don't say that, I don't want to say that as a negative towards it, but it kind of is. And it's like you got to put on your big boy and big girl pants to run a true P&L, because now it's not just about closing loans, sales. It's about literally counting how many toilet paper rolls are going that they're wiping their asses with, because that all is passing through. I mean, it's a true business.
Yeah, it becomes more of a lot more personal. As a producer, I close a loan that's $100,000. I make 150 bips. I know what my commission is going to be, right? I take it home, taxes, benefits, whatever. But it doesn't work like that in our model. You have to make that transition from a producer to somebody running a business, and you only close 10 loans where you're probably not covering the cost of everything you're doing. You close 20 loans, you're breaking even. You close 30. It's a much more personal decision. Everything is, I think, because it affects your pocket at the end of the day. You may make an investment or a decision now that's not going to pay off for 6 months, and you're going to eat it for 6 months. But then once that thing hits, like we think it's going to, that's when you start reaping the rewards of that. Like any business owner, you make a you make a decision to expand into an area, to expand a product line, to develop R&D, whatever it is, you got to sit back and wait for it to happen, right? And so you may not make a penny during that time, but then when you do hit it, that's when it becomes more lucrative. But that's very tough for people to handle. And then, kind of along with that, you have a year like a 21 or a 20, and mortgages are falling from the sky. You make a lot of money, and then you hit a 23 and you don't make anything.
Yeah.
Well, the smart guys bank their money in 20 and 21 to survive at 23 because they understand the flow of business. It's not there every year. But the ones that, maybe you're just spending it as it comes in and you hit a 23, it's extremely frustrating for you because you're used to it. If you're a successful producer, you're used to being able to go out there. You may not close 20 loans a month, you close 10 now or 7, but you're still generating income. And it's a big shift in a mindset for people. And it can be extremely lucrative, but there are times when it can be very dry.
Yeah. And by dry, we mean negative.
Right. Well, we hope not negative.
But it's possible.
It is
It's
possible.
very possible.
It is possible.
Now, is there a vetting process to this? Because it seems like it'd be a very risky proposition. And as I learned more, just from my experience, I started to gain an understanding why companies aren't transparent. And you look at it as a negative, but I get it. Like you're putting their livelihood in the hands of somebody who doesn't know what the hell they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so what is this company's process as it relates to kind of vetting who is deemed worthy of operating a true P&L?
Yeah, I think it's easier for somebody that's been with us, obviously, because like you and your team would grow and cultivate and make sure they're ready for that leap. But if it's somebody external, you've been through it. We start those initial conversations. It's typically our recruiting arm or somebody in your position. You're talking to somebody. You're developing that relationship. It's not like you meet somebody the next day you bring them, right? That doesn't typically work. Maybe for a recruiter, but even them, they're going through several conversations and they're selling to us and the candidate's selling themselves.
Courting process.
You have all that back and forth. But then when we reach the point where it becomes a little more serious, we do a really deep dive into their production history, any relationships that they have with us or in the industry. We look at all the people that they're trying to bring over, all their comp structures, all their leases and spending and everything that they do. We do a really extensive, we just call it a simple pro forma process. But, we walk through that, and then we walk through that with the candidate to make sure they understand it. And we walk through all the variables. We are super conservative with it. If a candidate, honestly, if a candidate says I close 10 loans a month, in my head I do 6, or I do 5, just because if you can make it a 5 and you actually do 10, then you're going to do great, right? So, and we explain that whole process and how we like to ramp up expenses and we like to keep an eye on things. And as it starts to click and as they establish themselves and kind of get their foothold.
Stable?
Yeah, stable is a good word. As long when they get that, then that's when we start kind of expanding that with them and helping them grow and go through that. But I would say it typically takes, it's probably 4 or 5 meetings on my half that involve me, and then several weeks, that's already going in before that. A lot of times we like to fly people in and make sure that they meet us and they meet our executive team and they meet all of our operations managers and see the facilities and know who we are and how to reach us. And we'll take them out to dinner and have a drink and get to know them a little bit better and make sure that it's a good relationship fit for us as well. It's not just dollars for us. And we walked away from several that just didn't make sense. Just different attitudes and different approach to business and didn't really fit kind of our model how we do things.
Well, and describe that. What does that mean? Why?
A lot of times you can tell if there's more of that. I guess selfish, not self-centered, because there's a lot of ego in the industry, which I think you have to have a lot of times to be great. But it's more of that, not that big picture, not really grasping how we bring everybody into things and how we get people involved. And I'm kind of going to be there holding their hand too initially, to make sure that I think they understand what they're doing and it's not going to be too big of a risk. And a lot of times you have somebody come in who's a lot of connections over the past, and so they may want to bring 5 people from mortgage company A and 5 from B and 5 from C and bringing a team in like that. That's hard to do and hard to make that click and hard to make that work. And so things like that, they're not necessarily no-goes, but it's just something that we have to think a little more about and really dive in deeper and make sure that we understand what it's going to take to make it work.
You mentioned the word pro forma, which to me is almost as dangerous of a word as pricing. No, well, I mean, when you're vetting a company, and we all know it. In fact, it's one of those things where it's almost a joke at this point. Like when you're talking to a new company, which pricing am I looking at? How manipulated is this? I think pro formas are another nasty potential pitfall that somebody could fall into, because you can manipulate those numbers, and I don't even think companies necessarily manipulate, other than, well, we know there's going to be this expense and that expense and this expense, but it's going to be variable, so we're just going to leave it out to make the bottom line look a little healthier, to make them want to come here. Pro formas, like, what is your take on that? Obviously, from our perspective, this company's perspective, versus what maybe you've seen through conversations with other candidates.
I load them up. I mean, I put every expense I can think of. I mean, you've seen it before. I haven't, for some people it's really frustrating. I just leave a line of other and I just pad that thing with expenses, because I don't care who I talk to at any point in time. Nobody ever tells me every penny they're spending. And nobody thinks, you just don't think about it, right? If you come from the wrong environment and, I don't know, some kind of business development expense or tech expense typically runs through corporate and you don't see it, well, it's going to run through your P&L here, right? And you need to see it. So a lot of people don't think about it, but there's a lot of people who are the same way. They want it to look good coming to us as well. I mean, I have, and I'm not, just saying that. I've never kind of fudged anything to make it look better than it is. If I think somebody tells me they're going to, close they have 300 basis points of pricing on a conventional loan, I'll put in 275 just to make sure that it works, and I'll carry that 275. Or, a lot of times I just run one in parallel behind the scenes just to understand worst case scenario and where it goes. But it's really, I think sometimes people leave it out intentionally, I'll be honest, but a lot of times people just don't know what to think about. So we tried to guide them through that process, but there's no way I know, that some guy likes to travel to see his people. He goes and visits all of his team once a month, which is great. If P&L can support it, great for relationships, but they just don't think about it. They go out to that dinner and they stay in that hotel or whatever.
They tend to buy the nicest steaks and the nicest drinks.
Sure.
On those trips, yeah.
And you just don't think about that stuff. So
it's
a trap.
Not only that, when you're a producer and you move into that role, I've never fails. Like, most producers don't really truly know all of the intricate expenses that actually are applied on every loan, like down to all of the various certifications and all the things that and the loan level things that you're like, I didn't think about that. There's 15 here, there's 50 there, there's 75 there, and that adds up when you're closing 30 loans. Now all of a sudden it's like, crap, what was that?
Yeah.
Or taking into account, running a true transparent P&L, taking into account that your loan officers are always going to lean to lock under par and never lean to lock over par. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah. And
so it's taking all of those variables into account.
Well, there's a lot of gotchas, right? So one of the things that I think is great about our P&L is kind of piggybacking off that. If a loan comes across your desk, and your loan officer wants to hit it 50 bips under or whatever, under par, you have the ability to say, yeah, great. This guy always hits par, or sometimes he's over, or I know it's a mass amount of business going to lead to something else. You can do that, right? You can take the hit right now. Odds are it's still going to be profitable and you're still going to do that, but you can do that. But where it gets difficult is keeping track of all those, because in your mind you're like, all right, here's one, and you lose track of that, and that's where the thing can get completely out of hand. And I don't think that that's something that a lot of producers track, right? I mean, some do, but just like really track the over-under, kind of that running total, which matters to you more when you're running the business, right? The loan officer, God love them, they're closing it and they know their commission they're going to get and they move on, right? And they're trying. I think a lot of them are trying to do the right thing day to day, but they're just not going to take the time to do that. I don't want them to. I want them closing loans and doing what they do. That decision's on the RVPs of the world or the P&L managers of the world. That's what their job is to do. So, but tracking that stuff and keeping and just knowing that plus minus, knowing where your balance is it's tough. But that's a huge gotcha to what we're talking about.
Gotcha. Is that a technical term?
That's a pull that out of buttergreen.
I was going to mention it earlier, but it was the topic got serious. That you were the first one to bring up drinking, for the record. You take out recruits to
That's a big surprise.
All right. So I want to finish this conversation. Is there anything that maybe is really important to discuss here? I mean, obviously, I have a lot of experience in this world, and I've seen the wins and the losses, lately losses.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is there anything that you feel like somebody coming into this world just absolutely needs to know that maybe I haven't already mentioned?
I don't think it's that you absolutely need to know. I just think it's a frame of mind that you absolutely have to have. And that's just being open-minded and asking questions. I mean, I know a lot of those times they can be tedious. A lot of people don't like going through the numbers. You're going to have to learn to, but just nodding your head and saying, yes, I get it, can really kick you in the ass later on down the line, because we have all kinds of people who come in and say, I don't remember that, or I don't, mainly it's expenses. It's never going to be, positives or revenue, but I don't remember that. I don't remember that having to hit the P&L. I never thought about that before. And I know that we sat through it and you nodded and said yes. And, I sent it to you and you spent some time and sent it back. It's just, to be successful, we have a lot of resources to back those people up. I mean, myself, we have an SVP of financial planning analysis. That's what they do with the RVPs and the branch managers. We have a branch controller, and she has a team. I mean, everybody's there to support and back you up on this stuff and answer. That's their job, 24/7, is to answer questions that you have and help you grow this thing. And then not take advantage of that and not look at your business and not ask those questions. It's what will crush you at the end of the day.
And I will say this from experience, that if you think you want to run a P&L and you think you're going to be able to focus on the sales side of the business, you're wrong. And we've learned that over the last couple of years. And one thing that I will say is that collaboration between even other P&L operators is really important, because some regions or branches might dig deeper into one cost center than that branch does, and you might be overlooking something that could make an impact on your P&L. That stuff, that's really, really important, but also important to point out that that's a good chunk of time. And so it's gonna take you away. So I always tell a top producer that says, I want a P&L. I'm like, do you? Are you prepared? Is your business prepared to continue to thrive without you living in it like you do now? Because you're not going to be able to. Right?
I think, we allow for producing branch managers. I think that's got to be one of the toughest jobs that there is. I mean, because you're trying to close loans to support the P&L, and you're trying to run a P&L. I mean, to me, it's you build up a team that's big enough to support a P&L on its own, so that you can get out of the business and hand it off the producing side of things. But I think that's got to be one of the toughest things that there is to do out there.
Also to manage that P&L, though, or even from your perspective, because which brings up a great point. A producing P&L versus a non-producing P&L are two very different things.
Yeah, our non-producing P&L, it's what you would think it would be. Like
it's true.
You close a loan and you generate $2,000 on revenue, you get $2,000 in revenue.
Right.
If you're 100 basis points under, you get 100 basis points under. Whereas our producing is a lot more. It's got to be a lot more dialed in and specialized and really treated more like a loan officer as the P&L is supposed to. It is. I mean, it's fully transparent, but it's fixed numbers that kind of take away that freedom, I guess, to make those decisions as much as you would on a non-producing P&L. But I mean, overall, from what I've seen, top to bottom, our P&L is probably the most lucrative out there in good times. When times are humming great and you're in tune with that thing, and you know your business and you're talking to your people and you manage that thing, the bottom line of it, I haven't seen anything else that's as lucrative as something we offer. But at the same time, when times are tough and you really got to bear down and you got to make that thing work, and you're not going to make all the money in the world every month of the year than every year of your career. But when times are great, I mean, you will make more money probably you never thought you could make. And then when times aren't great, you're not going to make a penny. But that's entrepreneurship. That's part of running a business on your own. So
totally agree. You mentioned in the beginning that you're forcing me to talk about your family. No, but you know what? We didn't bring that up last time, and I actually think I have with most of our guests. So Maybe I didn't bring it up because I just assumed that you couldn't convince a woman to marry you. But
It's tough.
You did.
Tough. Every day, I think I have to wake up and start all over like Groundhog Day. I start all over every day. All right, let's wipe the slate clean.
Married, kids?
Yeah, I've been married since 2002, so 22 years coming up on. 2 kids, a daughter that's 17, and we're starting the college hunt. She's a junior. She blows my mind every day. She's 10 times smarter than I am. So we're doing the college hunt, and she's heavily involved. And my son's 15, and he's 10.5 times smarter than I am. And they're both they blow me away every day. They're so busy, they're so involved, and it keeps us. He was in a musical this past weekend for the high school. He was one of the.
Oh, it's a chip off the old dad's block.
Key characters, and we spent 4. I watched this thing 4 times in 3 days. But it blew me away. Just the stuff these kids could do now, the resources they have available to them, and everything. So, yeah, it's hard to keep up with them. I don't see them like I used to, but that's part of life, right? It's fun watching them grow.
So what is that? A sophomore and a senior?
Sophomore. Oh, I'm sorry, freshman and a junior.
Yeah, junior. Okay.
Got a little time left.
Where is daughter leaning for college?
I don't want to talk about it. Really.
I won. I just asked you.
Oh, so I'm glad you asked. We're looking at WashU, University of Chicago, and Georgetown. So Jason's going to be working here until he's 92.
If Dad had to pick one.
I haven't seen Georgetown. I heard it's amazing, but we went and looked at Chicago 2 weeks ago, and it blew my mind.
That's better than WashU.
I didn't tour. I've been to WashU a few times. I didn't tour it. She said they're about the same. Chicago just has such deep roots, and they're so ingrained in the city of Chicago, and it's such a dynamic program that it would have been a complete waste on me. I mean, not to go back to the same topics over and over again, but I was like beer, girls, fraternity, and maybe went to class, And I mean, she's one of those people that's just built for college, and she's totally going to thrive on it. My son will be the same. So it's a little easier to think about it when you know you're going to get your money's worth, whereas my parents probably still cry every day hearing about it.
Yeah, well, and that's an interesting statement nowadays because college is not what it used to be. And I mean, I tell my kids, I'm like, if you're not going for a specialty career, do not go. Do not waste your money.
That's what I told my daughter.
Yeah.
I said, I won't name the profession, but I said, if you're going to be one of these 5 professions,
yeah,
I'm not going to pay for you to go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not there,
yeah.
right? You can get great educations.
You can party without
at state schools, right? I mean, we actually went to Mizzou too. She loved. They have a poli-sci program that she absolutely loved. Very dynamic, and she would have a great time there too. So
Georgetown, DC, though, that's cool.
Yeah, we're going there for spring break.
Fun.
2 weeks to check it out.
And what's your son's MO? What's he do sports or?
Yeah, he's pretty all over the place. It's funny. He was just hardcore baseball for the past 2 years. Like baseball's life. I need all this lessons. And then 3 days before baseball tryouts, he decides he's going to play water polo. Now he's JV water polo without ever trying out. It's just.
I feel like that's the hardest sport, and I'm a sports guy. I can't think of a harder sport than treading water while somebody's trying to pull you under while you're effectively dribbling a ball.
Yeah.
Effectively. You know what I mean?
He said they start every practice off just treading water for 45 minutes like old people.
Screw that. Yeah, I had a buddy in high school, and he said they would actually file their nails to a
I did that in basketball. When I played basketball.
I mean, God.
Well, they play a lot of co-ed teams too, and he said it's egregious, like because the women just don't understand, maybe they do, and they're just kicking and clawing.
Yeah.
And he said you got to protect
and
yourself.
And you can't touch the bottom of the pool. It's like a foul or something. Like
I don't know.
I only because I had a good buddy in high school. I was blown away. I was like, damn. I thought like other sport like that's tough. Those are the toughest mofos that I know.
Yeah, it's nonstop. They lift weights 3 days a week, and they're practicing 3 hours a night. It's
interesting. What's your wife doing?
She works for a food redistributor. So, they'll buy a truckload of ketchup and strip it down to a box for a convenience store or whatever. So she does that downtown. She's done that company for 10 years or something like that. Very friendly, family friendly, very lenient. Kind of let her do what she needs to do. So it's great. Awesome. Yeah.
We'll have to figure out what to talk about next. This was a good conversation. I think an important one. No, I meant like with you. With you, actually. Yeah. But thanks for being here, brother.
Yeah.
Good work. Good chatting.
Anytime, man.